Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Doug Haubert. He is the elected city prosecutor in the city of Long Beach, running for re-election. And so I want to speak with you about a decision that recently came out by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, the federal court. Surprising to many. As we know, California has some pretty stringent laws as it relates to guns. And California's law has been that if you want a concealed weapons permit, CCW they're called, that the localities could set the standard. And in San Diego, the standard had been you need to show good cause. Well, this decision by the Ninth Circuit ruled that good cause could not just be, I want to protect myself. They said that good cause is, if you're a law-abiding citizen, that's good enough. What do you think, sir?
Well, it's an interesting ruling, and I think it will be the first of several rulings. There's a split among circuits.
Right.
Eventually, the United States Supreme Court is likely to rule on a case like this. But in California, in the rural counties, I think the sheriffs have been giving out concealed weapons permits with a very low threshold. And in other counties, the sheriff's been using his discretion to require a high showing of good cause. And I think it makes sense. In urban areas, there's far more concern about weapons getting in the hands of gang members and other folks who want to do harm.
But let me ask you, I mean, you're the city prosecutor for Long Beach, second largest city in Los Angeles County. Under this ruling, it seems to be, are you a law-abiding citizen? If you're a law-abiding citizen, you can get a CCW permit. And you may be a gang member, but if you've never had a conviction, how do you deny a permit?
Well, what the law says essentially is you can't require a higher showing of good cause. You can't allow discretion for the county sheriffs to determine this person has a good cause, this person doesn't have a good cause. Essentially, if you're a law-abiding citizen, under this ruling, the government should not be asking you more questions about what you want the weapon for, what you need the weapon for. So that's the essence of this ruling. But remember, there's a split, so this will go up higher. And I think in LA County and in Long Beach and in urban areas, I do think that there is a concern that is a legitimate concern. And the concern is that the more weapons that are on the streets, the easier it is to carry a weapon in public. Will make it harder for the police officers that are trying to patrol these urban areas where gun violence is a reality. It's an everyday cause on the streets of an urban area. So the police are very worried, and the reason that these laws come about often is because the police departments are asking for them. The sheriffs, the law enforcement world is asking for these types of laws to protect citizens and to protect themselves from those that sometimes have better firearms than they have.
But let's think about what is likely to happen. The U.S. Supreme Court has been fairly protective of the Second Amendment. A few years back, in a ruling that some saw as surprising, they came down and said that an individual can hold a concealed weapon in their own home. Now, yes, this deals with concealed weapons out in public, but that decision was seen as a surprise. So if the Supreme Court goes the way that they seem to be going, what are prosecutors to do? Well,
I think the surprise in this case is that it was the Ninth Circuit.
The
most liberal circuit in America has basically landed on the side of the Second Amendment right. And for that reason, I think that does spell the end of this type of law. But remember, it's a concealed weapon permit given to someone who's a law-abiding citizen. And you mentioned, what if you're a gang member but you're a law-abiding citizen? I don't think I've run across one of those, at least in my community.
No, but honestly, sir, you could be a gang member and never have had a conviction, couldn't you?
I will tell you, it's very, no, I don't think I've seen one like that. Our gang members, and before they come on our radar screen, they've already proven that they're active in a gang. Active gang members, for a criminal street gang to be determined a criminal street gang, you have to meet certain predicate crimes. It includes rape and robbery and carjacking. It's a whole list of things.
But a specific member, I mean, they're 15 or 16, they're new to the gang.
Well, I'm not going to tell you it's not possible for there to be a gang member.
A minor probably couldn't get a CCW permit.
Probably not, but I will tell you, it will exclude a lot of people if they have a criminal record. A lot of the gang members that are on our radar screen that we know of, they have long criminal histories. And those are the ones you need to keep the weapons out of their hands. I'd be more worried about their brother getting a weapon, for example, their cousin, and giving it to them. That's the concern.
So what do you
I think that's the main concern. Well, I mean, look, California is at the forefront of passing laws. All the time, it seems they're coming up with a new law to regulate ammunition or weapons. I'm sure California, the legislature will go back to work at looking to see how far can you regulate weapons. So this went beyond what they could do. The Ninth Circuit even says this is more than the state legislature can do. They're going to have to curtail it.
But what's interesting is I know that the state state is going to ask for what's called an en banc hearing, which is having the
whole
entire
Ninth Circuit,
circuit
right.
look at it. And it should be interesting to see what happens there.
It would be interesting. I'm not sure the outcome will be different. I think it's
Really?
very rare that you have an en banc reversal. Yeah, very rare. It does happen, but I think it's pretty rare.
I want to talk about an award ceremony that you held recently. It's called the Impact Awards.
Yes.
And it's interesting because there's been a lot of discussion in the news lately about human trafficking, human slavery. We're going to talk to James Johnson about that in a few moments. He's a member of the Long Beach City Council. And one of the awardees of your Long Beach Impact Award was given that honor because of their work in human trafficking.
Right. The Vice Division in Long Beach has long been known for its work. They do a lot of undercover work. They've dealt with the prostitution trade in Long Beach. But human trafficking is a relatively new phenomenon, and it does involve gang members. This is one of those areas that gangs have gotten into because you can sell drugs once, you can sell a prostitute over and over again. Very, very dangerous underworld element going on here. Well, the Vice team in Long Beach investigated and arrested, and right now they're assisting in the prosecution of 2 pimps who kidnapped 2 women off the streets of Long Beach and put them to work in the sex slave.
Were they minors?
No, they were both over the age of 18, I believe. One of the pimps actually tattooed his name on the forehead of his of the woman that he was forced to enter into the sex slave. Now here's the part of the story that's not known, because what I've just told you has been reported in the newspapers. What hasn't been reported, though, is the assistance given to the victims. So these are people who may testify at trial against the pimps, but they need help getting on with their lives. They need help to move forward. What a traumatic event. I think that they were kidnapped for over a year and forced into the sex slave. But to have your pimp's name tattooed on your forehead, obviously it's very hard to overcome that. But working with our office and Homeboy Industries, we're helping to get the tattoos removed. And it's a way to give a fresh start to a victim who really needs one, and we should be helping that person. This is not often the role of the police department. They usually don't assist victims quite to this extent. But the reason they got an award from my office is they've gone above and beyond what I think any other department would do in assisting the victims. And for that reason, we were fortunate to have them at our award ceremony, and we gave them the Vice Department, the Vice Detail, an impact award for helping us make Long Beach, make a positive impact on Long Beach.
I want to ask you about the women that you refer to as victims, because for so long, if you were arrested for prostitution, you were the perpetrator.
Right, right.
And so I heard recently Jackie Lacey, the District Attorney of Los Angeles County, discuss how she is looking to change that paradigm, that in some instances the prostitute is really the victim.
Yeah, and the younger they are, the more likely they are
Right.
purely a victim of circumstances, and sometimes it's not identified by the police or by the
Right.
prosecution.
So how will you, sir, because I'm sure this is a new area, how are you going to start making those determinations that, wait a second, yes, she was arrested for prostitution,
Right.
but could it be that we have something else going on
Well,
here?
it starts with education among the police and prosecutors. And my office is participating in the Long Beach Human Trafficking Task Force. And we're educating. We have a victims advocate who's in my office who's now educated on what to look for, what are the signs to look for, and who to let know, which person in the Vice Detail, for example. If you suspect that there's a person who is a victim of the sex slave and not simply someone who is a defendant in court, to bring it to our attention so we can investigate further. These cases happen very quickly.
Right.
Very quickly. Sometimes they're arrested and they're taken to court within a day. Very, very quickly. There's not a lot of time to investigate the circumstances of the arrest and to see where were they the week before.
So that's the scary thing. What do you do?
Well, it's not always easy. I think the frame of reference is the right one, and I applaud District Attorney Jackie Lacey for presenting it that way. Many times they are victims themselves, and they are part of a machine that needs to be stopped.
Okay, his name is Doug Haubert. He's the city prosecutor in Long Beach. My name is Brad Pomerance. When we come back, we'll speak with James Johnson. He's a member of the Long Beach City Council. It's Charter California Edition.
From 2010 to 2012, what percentage of human trafficking victims identified in California were American? 27, 44, 56, or 72%? 72% of human trafficking victims identified by the state of California were American.
Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by James Johnson. He is a council member in Long Beach. He's a candidate for its city attorney, an elected position. And so I want to speak with you about human trafficking. It has been in the news a great deal lately. I heard a story on the radio recently about a young girl that came from Mexico, 15 years old. She applied for a job that she found in the newspaper. She proceeded to be enslaved for 3 years by a 58-year-old man. Just devastating.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard for us to believe. You know, I've heard recently in modern day slavery, we have more slaves today than any time in human history. And a lot of people think this is a problem that was solved many years ago, but it's not. We have a lot of people here in LA County, even in some of our richest cities, where people are living, working without pay, abused, and it's really a tragedy.
It's just a different, when we think of slavery, we think of Civil War era slavery.
That's right.
This is a different beast. This is much more insidious. It's individuals being brought into homes and enslaved in such a way that they feel that they have no way to get out, or it's the pimp.
That's right. You know, you have a lot of young girls who may have had substance abuse problems,
Right.
or maybe they're on, they were through the state system of
Right.
not having parents, a foster care system.
Of course.
And these pimps kind of get a control of them and say, hey, you know, if you don't make your money out here, I'm going to beat you, rape you. It's horrible. And I think one thing we've realized is these folks aren't perpetrators, they're victims.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about as well, because I recently heard the District Attorney of Los Angeles County, Jackie Lacey, discuss that very question. If an officer arrests a 15-year-old girl for prostitution, I mean, it's undeniable that she was acting as a prostitute. Is she a perpetrator of a crime, or is she a victim?
Yeah, and I think we need to look at her as a victim. And what 15-year-old girl wants to go out and sell her body on the street? I think what you're seeing there is she's being manipulated and abused by others. And over what we see is, in fact, those girls, they don't even make any money at all. Their pimps take all the money and basically control them and sometimes get them addicted to heavy drugs.
Right.
And we need to look at them as children. These are children that need our help, need our services, and really need our compassion.
And I understand through the LA District Attorney's Office, they're looking at a program that would divert these young girls into counseling and other services that would see them more as victims as opposed to perps being put in juvenile hall.
Well, that's right, because a lot of these girls have a history of sexual abuse by their parents,
Right.
or like I said, being left out in the foster care system and not being treated well. So I think we need to help them help themselves.
No, I know that you're currently running for city attorney, but in a prior life, you worked at a private law firm. I used to be a private lawyer as well, and the law firm you worked for, known as Morrison & Forster, very well known across the nation for doing pro bono work.
That's right.
And I know that you had a really unique opportunity when you were an attorney at Morrison & Forster, known as MoFo, to work with an individual that had been a victim
Yeah.
of slavery and trafficking. Why don't you tell us about that case?
Well, you know, Brad, Morrison & Forster at the time is the biggest law firm in California.
Right.
It's still a very prestigious, large law
It
firm.
is.
And one of the greatest things about working there was they gave me the opportunity to work for people without charging them,
Right.
pro bono work.
Pro bono, right.
And I was shocked to learn there I got involved in a case of a slave case. And here's a case where one law I was citing was the 13th Amendment of the Constitution saying there's no slavery. For a young lawyer, that's incredible.
It really is,
You know,
right.
And when I heard this woman's story,
Would
she
you
was-
tell us what you can
yeah.
about her story?
Well, my client was smuggled into the United States from Southeast Asia. She was brought into one of the biggest homes in LA County, a big mansion. She was kept without pay.
How old?
Well, she was basically in late 20s or 30s.
Oh,
era.
wow. So not a
No,
juvenile.
she was an adult. And she was kept basically as a domestic servant. But they didn't want to, even though these folks are very rich, they didn't want to pay her. And they would beat her, they would actually rape her, etc.
You're kidding.
And then they wouldn't even give her enough food, Brad. So here's a person, and you might wonder, why didn't she escape?
Right.
But think about it. If you're smuggling from Southeast Asia, you don't speak English, you're kept locked in a house, told that if you escape, the police will beat you. Those kind of
Threats of
things happen.
immigration.
Right. So, she was terrified, and she finally escaped when she didn't have enough food to eat. She was driven by hunger, and she finally got out, and that's when I, later on, met her and helped her in her case.
And what happened? Has it been resolved?
Yes, well, the prosecutors didn't bring the case. We don't know why, but I think it was because it was so difficult. Very rich defendants with power in their home country. So we brought a civil case. We did get a positive settlement for her, and we got
did?
her her own justice. Yeah, that's right.
Really?
Yeah.
So that says a lot.
Well, you know what, Brad? One of the beauties of this country is anyone has access to justice in our court system.
Right.
And when I was talking to her and other people in Indonesia, I said, what does it take to get justice in there? And they said, well, $50,000. You hand the judge a big pot of money, and that's how you win cases. Not in America. Here, she was able to tell her story. We're able to win that case by getting a good settlement. And I think it's really important that she now is in a safe place. She's stable. She got married and living a much better life.
So as a member of the Long Beach City Council, second largest city in LA County, and as a candidate for Long Beach City Attorney, how do you hope to address this issue of slavery, trafficking?
Well, first of all, Brad, what we're doing right now is important. We need to have exposure. We need the public to know that slavery is not part of our history, but part of our present. Whether it's these young girls on the street, whether it's the domestic servants who aren't being paid, whether it's people in our garment industry. A lot of people have been enslaved right now. And in fact, LA is one of the top 3 cities in America having this problem.
I've heard that.
First, we need exposure. The next thing we do is we need to tackle the problem. On City Council, I voted along with my colleagues to actually put together a special task force. These are police officers that would focus on particularly sex trafficking and helping these young girls. Because as the Chief McDonald said,
Chief of Long Beach Police.
Right. The more you look, the more you find. We need to start looking.
I wonder if, given that Long Beach has such a large and successful port, does this city become a port of entry for those individuals that may be trafficked?
Well, that's
Is that how they're getting in?
Well, partly it's through our airports.
Okay, but is it also through the port? Do you know?
Partly through the port, yes.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes people are. We've had instances of people smuggled in big cargo ships,
of
right?
Course.
They shouldn't be, but they are.
Right.
Also, we're close to the Mexican border, of course.
Yes.
So for all those reasons, we're an international city. But I think it's also important as the next city attorney, one thing I want to do is advise our police department. That's part of my job. How do we go after this problem? What are the legal tools to make sure that people who are enslaving people, who are trafficking people, pay a price?
I presume you would want to work with and need to work with the district attorney as well.
That's right.
But it's also interesting because Long Beach has a split legal department, I'll say. You have a elected city prosecutor, elected city attorney. So presumably the city prosecutor would handle lower level prosecutions, but you'd be the one who would advise the city council on these issues?
Well, I can advise city council, but I also can advise our department, the police department, about constitutional policing. What are some tools they may have? Can they seize people's asset seizure, for example? Can you do that for someone?
You?
Well, that's something we need to look at. Yes, you can for drugs, but I think one thing to look at is how can we do that for some of these trafficking
Like,
crimes?
for example, with that case that you mentioned, could that home have been seized?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, Brad. I think the issue there is, unfortunately, there wasn't a criminal prosecution.
Right, but for argument's sake.
I think theoretically, if you could say that this property was used in the commission of a crime, yes, I think that's something you could look at, but you have to obviously protect the people's due process and so
Now,
forth.
let me ask you, what can we do? Whether we live in Long Beach, we live in Los Angeles, we live in La Crescenta, what can we do to try to combat human trafficking, human slavery? I have to think that there are clues and signals that, walking on the street, we can see. What can we do?
Well, first of all, we can be the eyes and ears of the community, Brad. Some of these folks are living in big mansions for decades and no one pays attention to them. So when you see someone next door, say hi, be accessible, be neighborly, because you know what? That person one day may pass you a note. That's what some of these former slaves do, and a note says in broken English, help, help. They may feel they can do that if you, so I think a lot of it is pay attention. In criminal law enforcement, the most important thing is that neighbors take a look, notice the surroundings, and get those clues.
That's a great point.
I think it's also important we support organizations like the Coalition Against Slavery and Trafficking, CAST in Los Angeles, support them to help these folks. Because if you can imagine people like my client, after being beaten, after being raped, after being in prison, they need a lot of help. Psychologically, physically, emotionally. We need to get them back to being productive members of society. It's not going to be overnight, but they deserve our compassion, they deserve our assistance.
Okay, his name is James Johnson. He is a council member in the city of Long Beach. He's also a candidate for the Long Beach City Attorney. My name is Brad Pomerance. When we come back, we'll be speaking with a professor from Cal State Long Beach. She is starting a new organization, a new entity that will help victims of crime. You won't want to miss that. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California Edition.
Worldwide, which form of trafficking is more prevalent and by how much? Labor trafficking is more prevalent by 3.5 times. Sex trafficking is more prevalent by 5 times. Labor trafficking is more prevalent by 1.5 times. Or sex trafficking is more prevalent by 7.5 times. Around the globe, Labor trafficking is 3.5 times as prevalent as sex trafficking.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Dr. Bita Ghafoori. She is a professor at Cal State Long Beach. She is heading up an innovative program. We'll talk about that in a moment. You are a clinical psychologist.
Yes.
And I want to speak with you about crime and victims of crime. We know that there has been a lot of anger in California and America about so much attention being paid to defendants, and what about the victims? And that's where you come in. Talk to us about victims and what they face in the aftermath of a crime.
Yes, okay. So victims of crime actually face quite a few challenges after the crime has been committed. They may face physical harm.
Right.
Medical issues may emerge, bruises, anything from bruises to serious issues that may cause life changes for them.
And it's interesting, those physical challenges, you can see them.
Yes.
You can heal them.
Yes.
You can repair them.
Yes.
But you know much better than I that it's often the mental pain, the mental anguish that is so hard to heal.
Yes, yes. And in fact, you're absolutely right. I heard from a colleague at UCSF that you can sew up all of the physical damage, but unfortunately the mental anguish continues for many victims of crime. And some of the mental difficulties that they may face include depression,
Right.
post-traumatic stress
Oh, yes,
disorder,
no
or
doubt.
PTSD,
Anxiety
issues,
right.
relationship issues, as well as a host of other problems. Most
yeah, please.
importantly, it may impact their occupational abilities as well as their family functioning and social relationships.
And what's so interesting is you can never really predict how someone will be impacted by a crime. I was mugged, when I was in college. It was a very scary moment. They appeared, it was a group of young men, they appeared to have a knife. I was in an ATM machine. It happened incredibly fast, 30, 45 seconds. And when it was over, it was over.
Yes.
And that was it.
Yes.
And I felt lucky that for whatever reason, my mind processed it in a way that it left.
Yes.
But I could have taken a different path.
Yes.
That could have stayed with me for decades.
Yes.
What is it?
So what you experienced is probably what most people experience, in the sense that you may have had the coping abilities to be able to deal with that event, however
Right.
scary and horrific it may have been, and be able to overcome it on your own and
Right.
move forward in your life. However, we know that about 30 to 50% of individuals, unfortunately, do have long-term impact.
Oh, no doubt.
Feedback.
And my guess is you can't necessarily predict it based upon who that person is. It could be someone that is happy, healthy, no history of depression, no history of anxiety, and that single event
Yes.
can literally rock their world.
Yes, it's absolutely true. And in fact, we know that some events cause more harm than others. For example, sexual assault seems to stay with an individual for a very long time.
It's interesting you say that because I'm married, I've spoken with my wife, and her, many women's biggest fear is rape.
Yes. Yes.
Biggest fear. And for a man, we're just different. It's so, my biggest fear is, I don't know, it's something different, but the idea of rape,
Yes.
the violation,
Yes.
why?
Well, rape, of course, is an intrusive sort of violent event.
Right.
Unfortunately, it impacts a person emotionally. It makes a person feel extremely vulnerable and violated.
Right.
So rape tends to stay with a person and cause damage more so than other crimes. In addition to rape, there are other acts of violence, such as combat trauma. Tends to stay with
When you
people.
say combat trauma, meaning military?
Military combat
Okay,
trauma.
sure.
So we know that veterans tend to have devastating impact.
I interviewed a veteran once, big, tall, strapping guy. If you look at him,
Yeah.
picture of mental health.
Yeah.
He was falling apart.
Yes.
He was
Yes.
falling apart.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
devastating.
Yeah, it is.
There's some good news though. In Southern California, in the Long Beach area, you have been awarded a grant. and it will be to open the second trauma recovery center. Not
Yes.
trauma center.
Yes.
It's not for if you get in a severe car accident. It's a trauma recovery center focused, I presume, on mental health.
Yes.
Congratulations. Tell us about
Thank you
it.
very much. Yes, so this Trauma Recovery Center is going to be the second Trauma Recovery Center in the state. The first one is at UCSF.
Where you had worked formerly.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And so we are hoping to be able to serve the diverse victims of violence and crime in the area. We know that Long Beach in particular has a very high crime rate. We have some of the state's highest rates of specifically domestic violence, human trafficking. We have a very high rate of gang violence. And so we will be serving all of the victims of these types of crimes and violence. We have been awarded a grant from the state of California, Victim Compensation Government Claim Board. And we hope to provide a comprehensive center that offers mental health services, research-based effective mental health services, which is quite different than what crime victims may get out in the community.
So tell us about that. What does the research tell us about the most effective treatment for victims of crime?
Yes, okay. So the most effective treatments currently, according to the research, are more cognitive behavioral.
Which means?
Which means that they really focus on understanding how people think about their crime and how they're acting in relation to that thinking. Are they avoiding certain places or people or reminders because of the impact that crime has had on them emotionally?
Versus
more of a supportive, it's okay, you're going to, be okay model.
So it's really hitting the problem more directly.
Exactly.
I mean, really, it's
Yeah.
desensitization.
It is. It's a form of desensitization.
So if someone was mugged on the corner of Main and 5th, maybe you take them back
Yes.
to Main and 5th?
Yes. Actually, that would be quite
That's
helpful.
cognitive behavioral.
Yes. Yes.
How does that go?
And that is hard initially, but once they go back and they realize that Main and 5th in and of itself is not necessarily a dangerous place, but something bad happened to them.
It's almost
on
like an
Main and
OCD
5th.
thing in a way.
It is.
It's, you get into this loop that you think everything about Main and 5th is the problem. Anything that looks like Main and 5th is the problem.
Yes. Yes.
So how can individuals access the center, which opens March 1st?
Okay, so what they can do is they can go online. We're going to have a website.
Do we have it yet?
We do not have it
Okay,
yet.
hopefully by the time this airs, we'll have it, so I'll put it on the screen.
Okay, great. All right. So it's going to be the Long Beach Trauma Recovery Center.
Right.
It is part of Cal State Long Beach.
Yes.
So we will have a website. We will have a phone number. We will have information in terms of how to contact us. The other thing that's unique about this type of center, we know that crime victims oftentimes don't have the resources or ability to seek services. So we're willing to come to them.
Wow.
We're going
Into
to
the
have
home? Wow.
Yeah, so we're going to have social workers and case managers, and we're working with specific community agencies that have that are well respected in the
Right.
Long Beach community to be able to send people to crime victims,
Right.
meet them where they're at, and help them to be able to access services.
What about cost?
All of our services are at no cost to the client.
Wow.
Yes.
How?
Uh,
Through the fund.
Through the state of California.
And you're also working with these victims toward recovery.
Yes.
Could be financial recovery specifically.
It's recovery. It's in many ways. So yes, hopefully to get them working again.
Right, but I understand that the Victims' Compensation Board actually has funds.
It does have
And-
funds,
and
and
so-
so we're going to help them access those funds if they're eligible. So we're going to help them to be able to complete the paperwork necessary to be able to, for example, get burial expenses paid for if they lost someone as a result of a crime, medical expenses, mental health expenses.
This community is lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Her name is Dr. Bita Ghafoori. She is with Cal State Long Beach and its new Long Beach Trauma Recovery Center. My name is Brad Pomerance, and this is Charter California Edition.